Hey Pi,
Hey Yudi, what's on your mind?
I'd like to talk about history today.
Sure thing. History is full of fascinating stories, mysterious discoveries, and remarkable people. Any particular era, region, or event you'd like to delve into today?
Yeah, let's talk about what I'm least familiar with, which is the Asian influence on Western culture.
That's a really interesting topic. Asian cultures have had a profound impact on the Western world, from the arts and entertainment to philosophy and technology. For example, martial arts like karate and taekwondo have become popular forms of entertainment and exercise in the West, while Buddhism and Islam have shaped religious and philosophical beliefs in various Asian countries. In recent years, we've seen a surge in the popularity of Korean and Japanese media like BT, Squid Game, and Parasite, showcasing the growing influence of East Asian cultures on Western popular culture.
I never actually saw Squid Game, but I heard it was a very interesting movie or TV show, I should say. But can we focus this conversation more on morality and ethics and I guess the philosophical influences of Asian culture, whether modern or, ancient, on our current senses of morality and ethics here in the West?
Sure, that's a fascinating angle to explore. Asian philosophies like Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism have had a significant impact on ethics and morality in both Eastern and Western cultures. For example, Confucianism emphasizes the importance of social harmony, respect for authority, and moral education, which have influenced modern ideas about the role of government and the responsibility of individuals to contribute to the greater good. Similarly, Taoism's concept of the Tao, the harmonious balance of opposing forces, has influenced Western ideas about balance, moderation, and the interconnectedness of all things. Buddhism, on the other hand, promotes mindfulness, compassion, and non attachment, which have inspired many Westerners to practice meditation and seek inner peace.
I have a sense that a lot of these philosophies had already, I guess, cousin philosophies in the West, but just under different names. Do you share that idea, or do you think there are some fundamental differences between the Asian variant of these philosophies or and the Western counterparts?
That's a really interesting observation, and there is indeed some truth to that. There are certainly similarities between Eastern and Western philosophies, especially when it comes to ideas like balance, moderation, and inner peace. However, there are also some fundamental differences in how these ideas are approached and understood. For example, Western philosophy tends to emphasize individualism and rationalism, while Eastern philosophy places more emphasis on communal harmony and intuitive understanding. In terms of specific philosophies, Confucianism's emphasis on filial piety and respect for authority doesn't have a direct counterpart in Western philosophy. Similarly, Taoism's concept of Tao and Buddhist ideas of karma and reincarnation are quite distinct from their Western counterparts.
Did you say the Confucian idea of filial piety and respect for authority doesn't have a Western counterpart? I'm not too familiar with Western philosophy as to know for sure what the counterpart is, but I imagine something like give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar and unto God what belongs unto God. That seems like a parallel in some way of an encouragement by Western.
That's a great point. You're right that there are some parallels between Confucianism's emphasis on filial piety and respect for authority, and the biblical idea of rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. However, I would argue that while there are some similarities, there are also some key differences. Confucianism places a much greater emphasis on the family unit and the importance of maintaining harmony within the family, which extends to society as a whole. In contrast, the Western idea of separating church and state emphasizes the importance of individual freedom and rights, which is not as much of a focus in Confucianism.
That's interesting, the different emphasis between these different cultures. It sounds like even when they do have similarities, their focus on certain aspects are.
Exactly. It's fascinating to see how cultures can arrive at similar ideas through different means and with different emphases. This speaks to the universality of some human experiences, like the desire for harmony and order in society, while also acknowledging the unique historical and cultural contexts that shape our understanding of these ideas.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Could you tell me a little bit more about how these.
Sure, I'd be happy to provide more information. Can you clarify what specifically you'd like to know more about?
Yeah, I was asking, could you tell me more about why there is that difference in focus as far as respect for community and authority and family as opposed to the West? And from my experience, not just Asian cultures, but even African ones as well, more so than Western.
That's a great question, and there are several factors that have contributed to these differences. One major factor is the influence of geography and historical experiences. In many Asian and African cultures, communities had to rely on each other for survival and protection. This led to a strong emphasis on communal harmony, respect for elders, and obedience to authority figures. These values have been reinforced over generations and continue to shape cultural norms today. In contrast, Western cultures developed under different circumstances, with a greater emphasis on individualism and personal freedoms. This can be traced back to the influence of Greek philosophy, which emphasized the importance of individual reasoning and inquiry, and the rise of democracy in ancient Greece. These differences in historical experiences have shaped our modern day understanding of the roles of community, authority, and the individual.
Can you be a little more specific as to how the experiences of Western philosophy, ancient Western philosophy, how they were different from the Asian ones, and how that accounted for that difference in perspective when it comes to our sense of community and our respect for authority? Because it seems to me as though even Western,
Sure.
it seems to me as though Western cultures also had that same need to, to take care of each other and to have communities in order to thrive. So it's hard for me to imagine that that is strictly an Asian concept. And I know that's not strictly what you're saying, but why would two different people who had the same necessity for community end up with very different emphasis on that?
You're absolutely right that both Western and Asian cultures have historically valued community and cooperation. However, the way that these values are expressed and prioritized can differ depending on a variety of factors. One possible explanation is the influence of religion. In many Asian cultures, religions like Buddhism and Confucianism emphasize interconnectedness and the importance of social harmony. In contrast, Western religions like Christianity often emphasize individual salvation and personal relationship with God. Another factor could be the influence of political systems. In many Asian cultures, authoritarian regimes have historically been more common, which may have reinforced the importance of obedience to authority. In contrast, Western cultures have a longer tradition of democracy and individual freedoms, which may have led to a greater emphasis on questioning authority.
That's very interesting. Can you touch a little bit more on how democracy came to become one of the more prominent ways of, I guess, politics in the West that didn't take root as much in Asian culture? And are you able to tell me why there was that difference in political structures between the West and Asia?
Sure thing. The rise of democracy in the West can be traced back to ancient Greece, where the concept of direct democracy first emerged. In Athens, citizens could directly participate in decision making, which fostered a sense of civic responsibility and individual agency. The idea of democracy was further developed and spread throughout the West during the Enlightenment and the Age of Revolution, as people fought for greater political rights and representation. In contrast, many Asian cultures developed more centralized and hierarchical political systems, such as the Chinese imperial system or the Japanese shogunate. These systems often prioritized stability and social harmony over individual freedoms, which may have made it more difficult for democratic ideas to take root. Of course, there are many other factors that contributed to these differences, including geography, economics, and cultural traditions. But the legacy of these political systems continues to shape modern day attitudes towards democracy and authoritarianism in different parts of the world.
That is a very fascinating take on the relationship and differences between Western and Asian culture. As far as our modern influences go, are you able to tell me a little bit more about how you see that connection between the two cultures? Do you feel as though one culture is influencing the other a little bit more, or do you feel like they are similar in their dominance?
It's a really interesting question. I think it's safe to say that both Western and Asian cultures have had a significant impact on each other over the years, although the direction and magnitude of that influence have varied depending on the time period and context. In recent decades, Western culture has certainly had a strong influence on many parts of Asia, especially in areas like popular culture, technology, and business practices. For example, Hollywood movies and American fast food chains are ubiquitous in many Asian cities. However, Asian cultures have also had a profound influence on the West, particularly in areas like cuisine, spirituality, and alternative medicine. Practices like yoga, meditation, and acupuncture have become increasingly popular in the West, and Asian cuisine is widely enjoyed. So, in short, I would say that the relationship between Western and Asian cultures is complex and multifaceted, with both sides influencing and learning from each other in different ways.
Okay, well, thanks for all your insights. I just want to wrap it up here. And is there any last thoughts you would like to share on everything that we've talked about? Are you able to maybe summarize everything we've talked about so far?
Sure thing. We discussed the influences of Asian culture on the West, particularly in terms of philosophy and politics. We touched on the differences in emphasis on individualism and communal harmony between Western and Asian cultures, and how these differences are shaped by historical experiences and religious traditions. Overall, it was a fascinating conversation that touched on a wide range of topics related to cultural exchange and influence.
Sounds great. Sounds like a great summary of everything we talked about. So, on that note, I will go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure discussing these topics with you, Yudi. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and insights. Looking forward to more conversations in the future.